You have probably pulled an all-nighter at some point. Maybe for an exam, maybe for work, maybe just because something kept you up through the night. And you remember how you felt the next day, the heavy eyelids, the difficulty forming sentences, the way the world seemed slightly wrong, slightly slower, slightly harder to navigate than it normally does. That was just one night without sleep. Now imagine 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, a week. What would actually happen to a human being who stopped sleeping entirely? Not the tired but functional version of sleep deprivation that most people have experienced, but the genuine, prolonged, complete absence of sleep. How long before the brain starts to break down? How long before the boundary between waking reality and something else begins to blur? And is there a point of no return, a line beyond which sleep deprivation becomes not just dangerous, but potentially fatal? The answer to these questions is one of the most fascinating stories in human biology, and in the strangely underappreciated science of what sleep actually is and why the brain will go to extraordinary lengths to make sure it gets it. Sleep is not optional. It never was. And what happens when it is removed tells you everything about what it was doing in the first place. Subscribe to Freud Mind, and let us get into what happens when the lights stay on too long. The first 24 hours without sleep are uncomfortable, but manageable for most people, at least on the surface. Underneath the surface, the situation is already more serious than it appears. After staying awake for 16 to 17 hours, which for most people means by late evening of the day they decided not to sleep, cognitive performance has already declined to a level comparable with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. Not drunk, but meaningfully impaired. Reaction times are slower. Decision-making is less reliable. Attention lapses more frequently, and the ability to accurately assess your own performance decreases. This last point is particularly important. Sleep-deprived people consistently overestimate how well they are functioning, which is part of why sleep-deprived driving is so dangerous. The brain is running a system called sleep pressure, the accumulating drive towards sleep that builds throughout the waking day. A chemical called adenosine gradually increases in the brain the longer you're awake, creating the sensation of sleepiness. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, which suppresses the sensation of sleepiness without actually reducing the underlying sleep pressure. When caffeine wears off, the accumulated adenosine is still there. This is the crash, the suddenly overwhelming sleepiness that arrives when the suppression stops. Memory is already affected at the 24-hour mark. The brain encodes memories during the day, with the expectation that sleep will arrive overnight to consolidate them. Without sleep, that consolidation does not happen. Information that felt like it was learned, facts absorbed, skills practiced, begins to fade without the overnight processing that would normally secure it. Short-term memory capacity decreases. The ability to form new memories is reduced. Emotionally, the change is noticeable. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most responsible for rational thinking, impulse control, and emotional regulation, is one of the first areas to show reduced function under sleep deprivation. The result is not dramatic in the first 24 hours, but it is real. Slightly shorter temper, slightly reduced patience, slightly more reactive emotional responses, slightly worse judgment about situations and other people. The filter that normally sits between feeling something and acting on it becomes thinner, and something else begins at around this point: microsleeps. These are brief episodes of sleep, lasting anywhere from a fraction of a second to several seconds, that the brain inserts into waking consciousness involuntarily, without the person experiencing them typically being aware they happened. The brain essentially forces these tiny sleep episodes as partial pressure relief. During a microsleep, eyes may close briefly, the head may drop, and the person momentarily disconnects from their surroundings, which is why microsleeping while driving is so immediately dangerous. By the end of the second day, 48 hours without sleep, the situation has shifted from uncomfortable to genuinely alarming in ways that become visible. Cognitive performance has declined significantly across essentially every domain that can be tested. Processing speed, how quickly the brain can respond to information, is substantially slower. Working memory, the mental workspace that holds information being actively processed, is functioning poorly. The ability to think flexibly, to solve novel problems, to adapt to changing circumstances, all measurably impaired. The person at this point can still talk, still move, still perform very simple automatic tasks, but anything requiring sustained attention or complex reasoning is increasingly difficult. The emotional changes are more pronounced. Sleep deprivation at 48 hours produces what researchers describe as significant mood disruption. Not just irritability, but something closer to emotional instability, where the normal range of emotional response is compressed and extremes become more accessible. Small frustrations feel larger. Small setbacks feel disproportionately discouraging. The social performance that most people manage automatically, reading others' emotions, calibrating responses appropriately, maintaining the minor social graces that make interaction smooth, requires more effort and is less reliable. The first perceptual distortions may begin appearing around this point. These are not yet full hallucinations. They are more like visual disturbances, the sense of something moving that was not there. The brain's perceptual processing, normally reliable at separating signal from noise, is becoming less discriminating. Things that would normally be filtered out as irrelevant background activity begin registering in ways they should not. Physically, the body is showing signs of the disruption. The hormone cortisol, high in the morning to support alertness, declining through the day, begins to show abnormal patterns. Insulin sensitivity decreases, meaning the body is less effectively managing blood sugar. Core body temperature regulation becomes slightly less precise. The immune system, which normally takes advantage of sleep periods for significant repair and defense activity, is being denied the opportunity to do this work properly. The third day, 72 hours, is where the boundary between extreme sleep deprivation and something qualitatively different begins to be crossed. By this point, most people who reach 72 hours without sleep are experiencing what can only be described as a fragmentation of normal, waking reality. Hallucinations, genuine sensory experiences that are not produced by external stimuli, become common. These are typically visual, seeing things moving in the periphery of vision, perceiving patterns in random surfaces, seeing objects or figures that are not there. In some cases, they extend to auditory experiences, hearing sounds, voices, fragments of speech. The brain's sensory processing system, without the regular recalibration that sleep provides, begins generating internal signals that are difficult to distinguish from external input. There is a famous documented case involving a high school student named Randy Gardner in 1964, who stayed awake for 264 hours, 11 days, under medical observation in what became one of the most cited sleep deprivation case studies. By the third day, Gardner was experiencing significant perceptual disturbances. He mistook a street sign for a person. He believed he was a famous footballer. He experienced paranoid thoughts. By later in the process, his cognitive state had deteriorated to the point where he was barely able to complete a simple countdown from 100. The confusion and disorientation at 72 hours is profound. Time perception becomes increasingly unreliable. The person may not know accurately what time it is, what day it is, or, in some cases, where they are. Concentration on any sustained task is extremely difficult. Instructions that would normally be simple to follow require significant effort. Microsleeps are now occurring so frequently that the person is essentially spending periods of their waking time in a kind of semi-sleep state, present in the room, eyes perhaps open, but mentally disconnected from what is happening around them. The brain is forcing rest wherever it can find the opportunity. Beyond 72 hours, the picture becomes increasingly serious in ways that are difficult to study directly in humans, precisely because the ethical concerns of allowing someone to continue are significant. In animal research, primarily in rats, total sleep deprivation for extended periods is consistently fatal. The mechanism appears to involve multiple system failures. Immune function collapses, the ability to regulate body temperature fails, and eventually organs begin to fail. The rats develop sores. Their bodies stop being able to maintain basic homeostasis. They die, typically within 2 to 3 weeks of total sleep deprivation, despite having access to food and water. The direct parallel to humans is not perfectly established. We are not rats. And the ethics of human sleep deprivation research stop well short of the extreme experiments conducted in animal models. But the clinical evidence from extreme human cases is consistent with the animal research in suggesting that indefinitely prolonged sleep deprivation would ultimately be fatal. There is a rare genetic condition called fatal familial insomnia that provides the most direct evidence for this in humans. This is a prion disease, a misfolded protein that progressively destroys specific brain regions that causes relentless insomnia. As the condition progresses, the person becomes unable to sleep despite being exhausted. They experience hallucinations, dementia, and progressive physical deterioration. The outcome is invariably fatal, typically within months to a year of symptom onset. The inability to sleep in this condition is directly connected to the fatal outcome, not coincidentally associated with it, but causally linked through the destruction of the brain circuits that normally regulate sleep. The lesson from fatal familial insomnia is grim but informative. The brain is not built to run indefinitely without sleep, and when the mechanism for sleep is destroyed, the consequences are catastrophic. To understand why sleep deprivation is so damaging, it helps to understand in more detail what sleep is actually doing during the hours when it is happening. Because sleep is not nothing. It is a highly active biological state during which the brain and body are doing work that cannot be done effectively while awake. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance network, operates at dramatically increased efficiency. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain at a much higher rate than during waking, flushing out metabolic waste products that accumulate during neural activity. Among the substances cleared is amyloid beta, a protein whose accumulation in the brain is a feature of Alzheimer's disease. Without adequate sleep, these waste products accumulate. This is one of the most compelling biological explanations for the well-established association between chronic sleep deprivation and increased risk of neurodegenerative disease. Memory consolidation happens primarily during sleep. The experiences of the day, the facts absorbed, the skills practiced, the conversations had, are replayed and stabilized during sleep, moving from fragile short-term storage to more durable long-term memory. REM sleep in particular appears important for the consolidation of procedural memories, the how-to memories that underlie skills, and for the processing of emotional experiences. People who sleep after learning retain significantly more than people who attempt to learn the same material and then stay awake. Hormone regulation depends critically on sleep. Growth hormone, which is essential for physical repair, for muscle maintenance, and for a range of metabolic function, is released primarily during deep sleep, in its largest daily pulse. Without adequate deep sleep, this release is disrupted, and the repair processes that depend on it are compromised. Leptin and ghrelin, hormones that regulate hunger and satiety, are thrown out of balance by sleep deprivation. Leptin, which suppresses appetite, decreases with sleep deprivation, while ghrelin, which stimulates appetite, increases. This is the biological mechanism behind the well-documented association between chronic sleep deprivation and weight gain. The immune system conducts significant maintenance work during sleep, producing cytokines, coordinating immune responses, strengthening defenses against pathogens. The observation that people who are sleep-deprived are more susceptible to infections and recover more slowly from illness is not coincidental. The immune system is genuinely compromised by lack of sleep in measurable ways. One of the most revealing things about sleep is how it works across the animal kingdom, because the variations in how different animals sleep are extraordinary, and they tell you something important about what sleep fundamentally is and why it evolved. Dolphins and many other cetaceans, whales and porpoises included, sleep with only half their brain at a time. This is called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. One hemisphere enters a sleep state while the other remains awake and alert, allowing the animal to continue surfacing to breathe, to remain partially aware of its surroundings, and to keep swimming. After a period, the hemispheres switch. The sleeping half gets its rest, while the previously sleeping half takes over. It is a biological solution to the problem of needing sleep, while needing also to remain functional in a dangerous environment. Birds on long migratory flights face a version of the same problem. They need to fly for days or weeks, but also need sleep. Some migratory birds appear to be capable of microsleeping in flight, entering very brief sleep states that provide some of the restorative benefit without requiring them to land. Recent research has also found evidence of unihemispheric sleep in some bird species during flight. The brain's drive for sleep is so fundamental that evolution has repeatedly found creative solutions to allow sleep to happen, even under circumstances that seem incompatible with it. Some animals sleep in ways that seem almost inconceivable by human standards. Horses and some other large ungulates can sleep while standing, entering light sleep states that provide some rest without the vulnerability of lying down. Giraffes in the wild sleep remarkably little. Estimates suggest around 30 minutes to 2 hours of deep sleep per day, taken in very short episodes, possibly because lying down for extended periods makes them vulnerable to predators. Some animals enter states called torpor or hibernation that share some features with sleep but are considerably more profound. Body temperature drops dramatically, metabolic rate slows to a fraction of normal, and the animal essentially powers down for extended periods. Bears, ground squirrels, and many other animals use this strategy to survive conditions where food is scarce. While hibernation and sleep are not the same thing, hibernating animals still need to sleep when they emerge. They share the feature of being states the brain actively chooses in response to conditions, rather than simply failures of alertness. Humans do not have the half-brain sleep option. We do not sleep while standing, at least not safely. We cannot hibernate. We are among the most sleep-vulnerable large animals in the natural world, which raises the interesting evolutionary question of why. The answer likely involves the particular demands of human brain development and maintenance. The human brain, with its extraordinary complexity and its metabolic demands, appears to require more thorough maintenance periods than most other animals. The trade-off for having the most complex brain in the animal kingdom may be the most demanding sleep requirement in the animal kingdom. Could humans ever remove the need for sleep? Could technology, pharmacology, or some future intervention make the biological requirement for sleep obsolete, the way modern dentistry made many aspects of oral biology less limiting? The honest scientific answer right now is that this seems very difficult and probably impossible with any approach that does not find a way to replicate, rather than circumvent, what sleep is actually doing. The benefits of sleep are not single function. They are the product of multiple interacting biological processes that happen to occur during sleep. If you want to eliminate the need for sleep, you need to find alternative ways to clear metabolic waste from the brain, consolidate memories, regulate hormones, conduct immune maintenance, repair tissues, and maintain the dozens of other processes that currently require the specific conditions of sleep to operate. That is not a matter of finding a pill that blocks sleepiness. It is a matter of rebuilding much of the body's maintenance infrastructure. Some research has explored whether certain aspects of the benefits of sleep can be replicated pharmacologically or technologically. Targeted memory reactivation during sleep, using specific sounds or stimuli to strengthen the consolidation of particular memories, shows some promise as a way of making sleep more efficient rather than eliminating it. Transcranial stimulation of specific brainwave patterns during sleep has been explored as a potential enhancement of slow-wave sleep quality. These approaches are about optimization, not elimination. What might change is not whether humans need sleep, but how well they sleep and what they can do to maximize the benefit of the sleep they get. The understanding of sleep science is growing rapidly, and the tools for improving sleep quality are becoming more sophisticated. But the fundamental requirement, the nightly maintenance period that the brain and body have depended on throughout all of human evolutionary history, is not going away anytime soon. There is a final thought worth sitting with. We live in a culture that has spent decades treating sleep as the thing you sacrifice when you're busy, the flexible part of the schedule, the expendable hours, the time you can borrow from when the deadline is close or the night is interesting. The person who runs on 5 hours of sleep and remains highly functional has sometimes been held up as a model of efficiency and discipline. The science does not support this view. The small percentage of people who genuinely function well on reduced sleep, who have a mutation in a gene called ADRB1 that appears to allow more efficient sleep, are genuinely rare. The majority of people who believe they have adapted to less sleep have, research suggests, simply adapted to the impairment. They have gotten used to functioning at a reduced level and lost the ability to accurately perceive the gap between how they function now and how they would function fully rested. Every night, your brain is running the most sophisticated maintenance program in the natural world, cleaning itself, rebuilding itself, organizing everything that happened during the day, preparing itself to do it all again tomorrow. It has been doing this for your entire life. It will keep doing it whether or not you give it the time and conditions to do it properly. The question is simply whether you let it finish the job. Like and subscribe to Freud Mind for more.